Welcome to this course on ACCA paper P3, the business analysis paper. My name is David Laws, and in addition to teaching P3, I also teach the ACCA P5 paper. If any of you are studying that as well, you'll find P3 and P5 go quite well together. Before we get started talking about P3, one of the things that I feel is very important to let you know right at the very beginning is that P3 is very much a practical paper. It means there is an awful lot of exam technique that you need to go through. And so as we go through the course, I will point a lot of that out to you. Now, I am obviously a lecturer. I've been doing this now for about 12 years, so I've been doing it for a little while now. I am obviously a qualified accountant as well, so I've sat all the same kind of exams that you do, as well as teaching people on them. But before I became a lecturer, I actually worked at the ACCA. And my job at the ACCA was to work with the examiners. So I used to see the exams about a year before the students sat them. Unfortunately, that's a long time ago, and I haven't got any inside information for you, I'm afraid. But I used to see them, and so I used to get a chance to talk to the examiners, to say to them and discuss with them what exactly they were trying to get at in their exam questions, what words they used and why they used them, why they did a particular question in a particular way. Not only that, but I used to help work with the marking teams. So I would go along to the markers meetings and meet the markers, meet the examiner, and see how the ACCA actually mark your script. What are they looking for? I have also been an examiner for some internal exams that are set by a particular college. So I have been a student, I am a lecturer, I've been an examiner, I've worked with examiners, and I've been a marker. I'm not sure that there are any other jobs to do with exams that I could possibly do. So I've done pretty much everything. Now, during the course, I will try and pass on a lot of the information, a lot of the knowledge, a lot of the insider stuff that I've gained through doing all of those roles to you to help you with paper P3. You will see as we go through the paper, it is not the most technical of subjects. It's actually, in a way, it's actually a very straightforward paper. The examiner tends to ask you to do the same things over and over again. In virtually every exam question, he will simply say, here is some information, there is a problem, tell me what the problem is, and tell me how you're going to solve it. And that's pretty much all he ever does, which means it's a very, very good paper if you've got some common sense. There will be some theories, there will be some models, there will be some technical stuff that we'll talk about later on, but it all boils down to here is a problem, what are you going to do about it? And that's the key to passing P3, is to just be able to do that, to identify a problem and give some sensible advice. That's all there is to it. Now, let us have a look at the introduction to the paper, and in the introduction to the paper we can see what the examiner is trying to get at. Now, the examiner is a guy called Steve Skidmore, who has been an ACCA examiner now for a number of years. Very, very good examiner. And by that I mean he's a very fair examiner. He's not going to try and fool you with anything. He asks very straightforward questions. Not easy questions, but nothing hidden, nothing particularly tricky. As I said earlier, here's a problem, what are you going to do about it? Now, the ACCA has had a paper like the business analysis paper for a long time as one of its final stage exams. Why does it do that? Why has it got a lot of business stuff for people who are training to be accountants? The ACCA obviously thinks that after you guys have qualified, you are going to rise up through the ranks of the finance department, and hopefully at some point in the future you will be helping to run a company. If you are running a company, you need to know about P3 because that's the kind of stuff that you'll be looking at on a day-to-day basis running the organisation. So, the ACCA is very particular with what they say the aim of the paper is. In other words, why you are doing it. The aim of the paper is to apply your knowledge, your skills, and you have to exercise some judgment. Now, that first word that we've got there, apply, is vitally important in this exam. It's not about learning things for the sake of it. Yes, you need some knowledge. Yes, you need some skills. For example, you need to be able to calculate various ratios. We'll talk about that later on in the course. But the main thing you need to do is you need to apply it. Here is a problem. I use my knowledge to give you an answer. That's all there is to it. Now, it also says in here, you have to use your professional judgment. You have to act like you are already qualified. You have to act as though somebody is paying you for the information that you are about to give them. One of the things that I say to my students when they're doing the exam questions is I say, imagine that you are a consultant. Imagine that the company in the question has come to you for your advice. If your advice is good, then you will get paid. If your advice is professional, then you will get paid. If your advice is helpful, then you will get paid. If your advice is rubbish, then you go hungry. One of the things that students do all the time in the exam, they do it over and over and over again, is they simply write down their knowledge. They ignore the exam question entirely. They don't apply any knowledge at all. They simply list out what they know. Look at what I've done, Mr. Examiner. I know all about this subject. And the examiner will say, you get 0, because what I want you to do is to apply it. You must practice that. You must practice applying your knowledge wherever you possibly can. And I'll talk about that in a little while. So, you need to apply some knowledge. I will give you the knowledge. You need to do the application of it. We will look at the strategic position. That's going to be the first few chapters. We need to look at the strategic position. That's going to be about the first 8 chapters of the notes, working out what we could do. We will then have some choices. We will come up with some options. You could do this, you could do that. We will choose one of them. You could do this, you could do that. This is the one that I recommend, and this is why. So again, it's going to be very practical. And finally, we'll have some action. Now, that's basically the first half of the course. What's happening? What could you do about it? How would you make it happen? The second half of the course is all the stuff you can see here. It talks about business processes, knowledge systems, quality, projects, etc., etc. That's a bit more technical. There will be a few more models and theories in there. But again, the key in the exam is it's going to be practical. So, here's a problem. How could you use your knowledge of quality or your knowledge of processes or your knowledge of projects to solve this particular issue? So, if you forget everything else on the entire course, which I hope you won't, please remember the exam is very, very practical. So, what's the exam paper going to look like? One compulsory case study. The examiner has said that this will be roughly 2 or 3 sides of A4. It will include lots and lots of text, so lots of writing. It will also include quite a lot of numbers. So the examiner is going to ask you to look in detail at a particular company in a particular situation. Now, as I will say later on in the course, the examiner has already said that the kind of companies he's going to look at, the kind of industries he's going to look at, are ones that should be familiar to you. So, for example, in the very first exam, we had an airline. Now, everybody's going to know something about airlines. So the idea is going to be, it will be a company you've heard of. Almost certainly, the company's got some problems. You'll have to say what they are. Then you're going to have to come up with some solutions. Now, that's the key to passing this exam. Out of the 50 marks, you should realistically be looking for around about 30. We will talk about why later on during the course. But just saying it simply now, and again, I will tell this to you again, but the reason why you're looking for a good mark is an awful lot of the marks will be there, it's sitting in front of you. The examiner's going to have to tell you a lot of things. All you have to do is to say why they matter. What problems are they causing? So you're looking for about 30 out of 50. There are then going to be 3 scenarios, and a scenario is again going to be about a company, but it's probably going to be round about half to 2/3 of a side of A4. So you will again be given some facts about a company. Almost certainly you will be given a company with a problem that you're then going to solve. That tends to be the second half of the syllabus, more technical bit, where we talk about processes, quality, projects, a little bit more to learn, but again, still got to be applied. Now, if you've got 30 out of 50 on the case study, that obviously means that you're only looking at 20 out of 50 on the optional questions. Some students find the optional ones a little bit harder because they're a little bit more technical. But again, the key is just always going to be solve a problem. Now, the idea then, when we do the course, is you've got to practice as much as possible. I'm going to go through some questions with you. I would suggest that whenever we're going to do a question, you have a go at it yourself first, and then we'll talk about it together. Lots of students, when they study, their idea of doing a question is waiting for me to do it and then writing down what I say, which unfortunately, although that's very gratifying that they do that, doesn't really help you very much in the exam. So always have a go at the questions. I would recommend that you also get hold of a decent paper. Now, when I say a decent newspaper, one with a decent business section. Probably the best thing to do is to just read something once a week, because in a daily paper, often there isn't a lot of detail. It's about big news stories that happen every day, and often there isn't a lot of depth to the articles. What you are looking for is where a newspaper can maybe spend 1 or 2 sides talking about a particular industry. You're looking for the kind of problems that are faced by companies. You're looking for the kind of solutions that they are coming up with. So, between now and the exam, look at what's happening to big car manufacturers. Look at what's happening to big hotel chains. Look at what's happening to holiday companies. All these kind of things that are big industries. I'm not saying those are what the exam is going to be about, but big industries, what kind of problems do they face? Because the chances are the company in your exam is going to be facing some of the same problems. So if you know what kind of problems the industry faces, you'll be able to analyse the problems better. If you know what kind of solutions real-life companies come up with, you'll be able to give them some better alternatives. So this is a very, very practical paper. If you find yourself in the exam simply listing out what I've got on page 79 of the notes without referring it to the company, without talking about the company's problems, without talking about possible solutions, I'm afraid you've probably missed the point of the question. So whenever we're doing a topic, think to yourself, how could I apply that? How could I apply that to the company I work for? How could I apply that to companies my friends work for? How could I apply that to companies I read about in the newspapers? How could I apply that to companies whose advertising I see? That's quite a good one, and we'll talk about that later on in the course. How could I apply it? The more you can apply, the better your mark will be in the exam. So I hope that you enjoy the course, and obviously I hope that at the end of it, it turns out that you're successful.